Professor Hoon Hian Teck.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as the country implements yet again another round of restrictions under Phase 2 Heightened Alert, with measures to support businesses and workers, we can look at historical parallels since our independence to see if we can draw some lessons. The COVID-19 economic shock has the characteristics of a supply-induced contraction of gross national product. The withdrawal of British forces from Singapore not long after our independence similarly resulted in a supply-side contraction of our national output. In the Budget Day speech given in Parliament on 3rd December 1968, the then Minister for Finance, Dr. Goh Keng Swee, addressed two fiscal implications of the accelerated withdrawal of British military forces. One, there was the need to tackle the consequent decline in our gross national product and the loss of employment of large numbers of locally employed civilians, as well as enlisted personnel due to layoffs, retrenchments. Two, the nation would have to address the need to increase taxes to finance a forecasted defense expenditure reaching some 10% of gross national product as the country assumed full responsibility to build up its own defense force. Then as now, I believe that there are three main thrusts in a comprehensive fiscal response that pays attention both to the short-term as well as to the long-term needs of our economy. First, there is the need to provide immediate fiscal resources to keep businesses afloat and to save jobs. In the 1968 budget, it was announced that a number of measures had been undertaken to help redundant base workers. This included providing redundant workers liquidity during the period of their job search through the Central Provident Fund scheme, into which all gratuities were deposited and from which regular amounts could be drawn. In addition, the government introduced a training scheme to equip them with skills for new occupations in industries. Today, we are very fortunate that the government has the fiscal resources through the Job Support Scheme, JSS, to directly help businesses to retain resident workers. Second, there is the need to identify new sources of growth, even in the midst of this COVID shock, to steepen the trend growth path of the economy. In his speech, Dr. Goh noted that the best guarantee that adjustment to the economic shock brought about by the British withdrawal would be relatively prompt and painless. The way to ensure that it will be relatively prompt and painless was to ensure a sufficiently fast growth of the economy. Rapid economic growth, he argued, would lead to a rising demand for all categories of workers, and with this, there would be more job opportunities for retrenched workers. The support measures for Phase 2 Heightened Alert being debated here under the supplementary bill should be seen in the context of Budget 2021 that was presented in Parliament in February this year. And that budget includes measures to structurally transform the economy to enable innovation to drive productivity growth. Notably, the Jobs Growth Incentive, JGI, by subsidizing the new hires of resident workers, acts to complement the JSS. So, even though there are immediate needs and we have to cater to the short-term challenges many members have talked about for businesses, especially the ones that are domestically oriented, there is still a need in thinking about our policy that we keep our eye on how the trend growth will be like when the economy recovers. Third, even as we confront directly the challenges posed by COVID-19, there is still the need to recognize other fundamental spending needs of the country and to find the tax revenues to pay for the expected increased spending. Dr. Goh was upfront about the need to increase tax rates and introduce new taxes to meet the significant increase in defense expenditures, having said at the beginning of his speech that it was neither possible nor desirable to conceal increases of such magnitude. Today, we will need to confront the reality, even under the challenges of COVID-19, that an aging population resulting from increased life expectancy as well as reduced fertility rate, and therefore consequently the higher spending on health, that this will require additional fiscal resources. Madam Deputy Speaker, even as we face head-on the challenge posed by COVID-19, it is helpful to recall how we have tackled the challenge posed by the British withdrawal as a newly independent nation. With the benefit of hindsight, we can see how we overcame the earlier challenge of British withdrawal, as well as later challenges that arrived in each decade. In the 70s, the economy faced the challenges of stagflation, the stagnation combined with high inflation brought about by the oil crisis. In the 80s, around about 1984-85, Singapore faced its sharpest recession. In the 90s, Singapore faced the challenge of the Asian financial crisis. And in the noughties, the economy faced a global financial crisis. Yet, over this span of a few decades, despite the negative economic shocks, we were able to create new jobs. It is true, when sharply hit, the unemployment went up, but because we focused our policy on the trend growth, therefore creating new job vacancies, the unemployment rate then came down again. When we faced a supply shock to our GDP, such as the decline of the GDP last year, when the economy rebounded, it rebounded with that experience we have in the past, and we shaped the trend path of the economy that will allow us to move and continue on a higher trend growth path. There is therefore reason to believe that it is important that fiscal policy not only responds to short-term needs, but it also sets the parameters to raise the economy's trend growth path. And we have those few decades to look back, to have encouragement from. We also exercised fiscal prudence through the decades so that we were able to save and build resources to meet emergency needs. We were able to draw down on these reserves when the storm was most severe, notably during the global financial crisis, and last year when it was necessary to implement the circuit breaker, a lockdown of business activity, when the storm was at its most severest strength. Looking back, it is inspiring to read how Dr. Goh ended his 1968 budget speech. He had no idea at that time how the future decades would look like. And allow me, Madam Deputy Speaker, to end with this quote, which ends Dr. Goh's budget speech. I quote, "When the British military withdrawal is completed in 1971, a new era will dawn on us. This event is likely to be no less significant than our departure in 1965 from the Federation of Malaysia. Since 1965, we have proved that as a separate economic entity, Singapore has a far greater survival potential than many people here and elsewhere had believed possible. After 1971, we have to go through another test, perhaps a more exacting and rigorous test, and that is our survival potential as a separate political entity in a difficult and turbulent part of the world. if in the intervening years we have put to good account our resources in money, manpower, skills, and organization, I believe we shall pass the test of political survival as adequately as we now are passing the test of economic survival, unquote. Let us all take heart from how we as a nation tackled that earlier challenge. Madam Deputy Speaker, I support these support measures under heightened alert.